So thinking about balance, particularly uh, the challenge of uh, coming into a moment of imbalance or a period of imbalance. So in our case, we're standing on one leg, so we know that moment's coming. We're gonna wobble. We're gonna reach our other foot. We're gonna reach our hand for the wall. We're gonna fall. And um, one of the first things that we want to do is kind of bring our mind to that moment of the imbalance beginning, which is usually something like a startle, right? The eyes widen, perhaps, maybe the mouth tightens, maybe the arms reach or tighten, maybe we hold our breath, maybe we exhale, maybe we make a sound every time. And then often then we overcorrect, one way or another, which is now our secondary problem. We have to correct the correction. And so partly a bunch of practice can help you get used to this, sort of like, sort of like in boot camp, for example, you might initially, start crying or, hide your head in the sand when you hear the live gunfire. But, a week or two in, you just don't even hear it. You're just talking to your friends and doing, it's like, there's gunfire. So you get inured to it a little bit. So partly through the practice of these things, we can start to get to this place where, okay, I know this is happening, but my first sort of unconscious response is not a challenge to my system and therefore my balance, where I'm going, oh my God, oh what? And I can notice this if I have commentary that I need to say in my head or with my mouth. I can notice this thing if there's tension in the system, like I mentioned, in the mouth, the shoulders, the hands, if the arms reach and flail, if there's a big overcorrection of the torso, if there's a rapid movement of the other leg to find the ground, like, oh my God. And so a bunch of practice can help you moderate that startle response, or maybe even just not have it. Just say, I'm a little wobbly. Maybe I'm going to solve it. Or maybe I'll just put my foot down and start over. It's not always that I'm going to solve it. And I do that a lot of times in push hands. Like I have to kind of ask myself, like, am I going to work to recover this? Or am I just going to get pushed? And I recognize, like, sometimes I could just recover it, but I don't feel like it. That's not what I'm working on right now. So I'll just, okay, I got pushed and we'll start again. So working on that kind of awareness of that moment is really, really important. People miss that. They work on their balance in terms of strength and flexibility or determination. And then maybe they work on recovering their balance. Here are some skills. Most people don't. They fail their balance and then they just start again. But people don't kind of look at that moment of, oh, it's just starting to wobble. And do I adopt a demeanor that's going to support a return to balance? Or do I adopt a demeanor that's a challenge to the balance, which is already challenged, right?
Right.
So once we recognize that the balance is off, in our case, we're thinking about standing on one leg and trying to hold it for a bit. What I want to encourage you to think about is that the answer is not down, which is what we tend to think. We bend our foundation leg, we reach our foot down, we reach our hand to a table below us and near us, and we think, well, down is the answer. And I put it to you that the answer is more likely to be found in a combination of up and down. So a lifting from the head top, a lengthening of the spine as we sit into our legs, bend the knees, drop the tailbone, lower the pelvis. And maybe the sinking is a total of a half an inch or an inch or something. It doesn't have to be this full squat, but there's a settling. But thinking of that settling as a structure that's lengthening upward, reaching to the sky, if you like, but that structure itself is also sinking, right? So there's a lengthening up, and this structure that's lengthening is also sinking. And having that balance kind of mentally I think is really helpful, because that upward is an aligning of the body over the feet rather than dipping a shoulder, rolling the spine, waving the hands, moving your center of gravity away from your feet, right? When you're throwing somebody, you're trying to move their center of gravity off their base. Then it becomes unrecoverable. And so that lengthening up, and it doesn't mean that that's most of what I do, but it's some of it. So I'm just saying it's a 50-50 because we got to start somewhere. But in the particular moment, maybe you need a little more sink and just a bit of the up. Another moment, you might need quite a bit of up and a tiny bit of sink. So whatever that ratio is. But I think the recipe is always both, right? So that's something that I'd encourage you to do when you're doing these kind of practices is start with an attention to how do I initially react to the moment of perturbation, and then what do I bring to bear? What tools do I use to try and get myself back to balance? Most people don't actually reach for tools; they reach for hope. They just kind of and they have a bit of intention, like grit, like I'm not gonna fall, and they kind of tense and they correct and overcorrect, and they might make it, they might not, but it isn't really a well-developed plan to recover, unless the plan is to stop the exercise, put your foot down, put your hand on the railing, and then start again. But that's not really recovering your balance. That's just failing the balance and then starting over, which is admirable in and of itself. Get back up on your horse. But it isn't really a recovery of balance. And to the martial artist, the idea of recovery of an imbalance should seem like, man, that sounds good. How do I learn that? I want that. There's a lot of value.